Tokiyama Bay, on April 6, 1945, does not smell of the sea. It smells of heavy oil, smoke from low-grade coal, and a very specific kind of fear, the resigned, silent fear of 3,000 men who know that the sun they see rising is, with mathematical certainty, their last. Anchored in the center of this gray calm rests the Yamato. It is not just a ship. To say the Yamato is a ship is like saying Mount Fuji is just a hill. It is a floating fortress of 72,000 tons, the greatest war machine ever forged by human hands up to that moment. Its main gun, the triple 460mm turrets, each weigh more than an entire destroyer. The steel of its armor has the thickness of a cathedral wall. It was built to be immortal, the unsinkable avatar of the Japanese imperial spirit. But today, it looks like a cornered animal. Around the giant, smaller ships, the destroyers Isakaze, Hamikaze, Yukikaze, and the light cruiser Yahagi perform a humiliating maneuver. They are transferring their own fuel to the Yamato. The Imperial Japanese Navy, once mistress of the Pacific, has been reduced to this, cannibalizing its own fleet to fill the tank of its champion for a one-way trip. There is not enough oil to return. The logistics of the mission dictate the fate. Reach Okinawa, run aground on the beach, and transform the ship into an immovable fixed artillery battery until the last shell is fired or the last man is dead. It is Operation Tengo. Heaven, a poetic euphemism for collective suicide on an industrial scale. On deck, the air vibrates. It is not the wind, it is the boilers. 12 Campone boilers roar in the belly of the monster, devouring the precious oil, heating the beast's blood. The vibration rises through the soles of the officers. Leather boots and the bare feet of the sailors scrubbing the tick deck. The wood must be immaculate. Death demands purity, so that this record is not lost like ashes in the wind, and the honor of this final sacrifice is understood. Leave your like as one sealing a pact with the truth, and subscribe to the channel, becoming a sentinel of this story that has just begun. Inside the superstructure, in the stifling quarters, a silent ritual takes place. Young cadets, boys who have barely seen their beards grow, cut locks of hair and pieces of fingernails. They wrap these fragments of themselves in white paper, write their names and their mother's addresses. It is the anticipatory funeral. Their bodies will be vaporized, drowned, or torn apart by American steel. Those small paper packages are all that will remain to be buried in native soil. There is no weeping. Weeping has been banished. There is only the sound of scissors, the rustling of paper, and the clinking of ceremonial sake cups. The commander of the Second Fleet of Izabraisid Moral Sakichi watch as the horizon. He was against the mission. He knows that without air cover on, the Yamato will not have a single plane to protect it. They are merely target practice. But the order came from the Emperor. And the Emperor's order is not discussed. It is obeyed, or one dies trying. It chose to die trying. At 15:20, the anchor is weighed. The sound of the chain being retracted is a metallic lament that echoes through the bay. The Yamato begins to move. The water foams under the colossal bow, where the golden imperial chrysanthemum shines, defying the reality of imminent defeat. As the fleet leaves the inland sea and enters the Bungo Channel, the protection of geography disappears. The open ocean stretches out, vast and indifferent. On board, the tension changes nature. It ceases to be the melancholy of farewell and becomes the electric anxiety of combat. The lookouts in the crow's nests, the sharpest eyes in the fleet, sweep the sky and the sea. They know they are being watched. American submarines, the Threadfin and Hackleback, have already detected the task force's departure. Their periscopes cut the water in the distance, sending encoded messages crossing the Pacific at the speed of light. The giant has left the den. Night falls over the Pacific. The Yamato sails in a zigzag, a black mountain cutting the waves. The interior of the ship is a labyrinth of hot steel. The ammunition elevators bring the gigantic shells from the deep magazines. Among them, the infamous Sanshiki Type 3 shells anti-aircraft beehives full of incendiary tubes and shrapnel, designed to turn the sky into a wall of fire. The gunners sleep beside their weapons. No one goes down to the bunks. The dawn of April 7th brings low clouds and intermittent rain. Miserable weather to die in. Visibility is poor, but not enough to hide a ship 263 meters long. At 12:30, Yamato's radar wakes up. Spots appear on the phosphorescent screen. There are not a few. The operator blinks, wipes his eyes, but the spots remain there, multiplying like a virus. 150 kilometers to the south, the United States Navy Task Force 58 has released its hounds. Aircraft carriers like the Hornet, Bennington, Bula Wood, and San Jacinto have emptied their decks. The sky to the south darkens, not with a storm, but with a looming. Nearly 400 aircraft, Hellcat fighters, Helldiver dive bombers, and Avenger torpedo bombers converge on a single point on the map. They do not come for a battle, they come for a lynching. On the deck of the Yamato, the air raid siren howls. It is a sound that penetrates the bone marrow. Thousands of men run to their battle stations. Helmets are buckled, anti-flash masks are adjusted. The silence of waiting is broken by the stomping of boots and the clang of watertight doors being closed. The ship is sealed. It has become a hermetic coffin before the first shot. Admiral Itwi, on the bridge, sees the first black dots emerging from the low clouds. They look like annoying insects in the distance, but they grow fast. The hum of American radial engines begins to overlay the sound of the wind. The Yamato rotates its main turrets. The 460mm guns point to the sky, clumsy, furious, useless against targets so small and agile. The first wave descends as sky tiers open. Modern naval combat is not a duel. It is a summary execution. At 12:32, the sky above the Yamato ceases to be air and clouds and becomes a solid wall of metal and explosives. The order to fire is given. The 9 460mm mass spits simultaneously. The recoil is so violent it pushes the 72,000-ton ship sideways in the water. The sound is not something one hears. It is a physical pressure that liquefies internal organs and bursts the eardrums of anyone not keeping their mouth open. The Sanshiki shells detonate in the air, creating cones of flame and incandescent steel shrapnel, a desperate attempt to burn the sky. Visually, it is the apocalypse. Tactically, it is useless. The American pilots are not intimidated by fireworks. They dive through the curtain of smoke and fire with a surgical and terrible precision. First come the hell divers. They fall in a dive, almost vertical, howling like banshees. 2 armor-piercing bombs strike the Yamato near the main mast. The deck steel, designed to repel shells from other battleships 30 kilometers away, is torn apart at point-blank range. The explosion destroys the aft anti-aircraft battery. Where seconds ago there were men operating 25mm cannons, now there is only red mist and twisted metal. There is no time to aid the wounded. Blood lubricates the tick deck, making it difficult to keep balance as the ship begins to yaw frantically to avoid torpedoes. They come right behind. The Avengers, flying low, skimming the crests of the waves, like flying sharks. They know where to hit. They ignore the starboard side. The American pack has a collective mind. Hit only the left side, the port side. If they wound both sides, the ship sinks level and continues to be a weapons battery. If they hit only one, it capsizes. They want to see the giant's keel exposed to the sun. The first torpedo hits the bow. The column of water rises higher than the command bridge. The ship shudders like an animal struck by a sledgehammer. Armor plates come loose. Rivets pop like rifle bullets inside the lower compartments. Seawater rushes in, roaring, cold and relentless. But the Yamato is stubborn. It was built to withstand the punishment of gods. Damage control systems try to isolate the flooded sections. The ship still runs at 25 knots, surrounded by a forest of saltwater geysers raised by bombs that missed the mark. Black smoke from burning oil envelops the superstructure. Fire directors are blind. Radar is useless. The ship's defense falls to the light machine gunners, men strapped into their seats, vibrating violently while trying to track planes passing at 400 kilometers per hour. It is a knife fight against lightning. The blood boils and the ground gives way, but you still listen. Leave your like as a sign of resistance amidst the chaos and subscribe to the channel to ensure your presence is counted when tomorrow comes. At 13 o'clock, the second wave arrives. There is no respite. The sky vomits more planes. The light cruiser Yehagi, the faithful squire, is already agonizing nearby. Dead in the water, shrouded in flames, she absorbs enough punishment to sink an entire fleet, yet refuses to go under as if trying to divert attention from her master. But the Americans have eyes only for the biggest prize. 3 more torpedoes strike the port side of the Yamato. The impact is cumulative. The hydraulic system fails. The power steering groans. The ship begins to list. 5 degrees, 10 degrees. The horizon, seen from the bridge, goes crooked. In the damage control center, deep within the ship, the mathematics of survival become cruel. The officer in charge looks at the inclinometers. The ship will capsize if they do not correct the list immediately. There is only one way to ride a colossus of this size quickly: counterfloating. The decision is made in seconds, but it will weigh on the soul of history for millennia. They need to fill the tanks and compartments on the opposite side, starboard, with seawater to counterbalance the weight of the incoming water on the port side. But the starboard compartments are not empty. There are the auxiliary boilers. There are the starboard engine rooms. There are hundreds of machinists and engineers fighting to maintain electrical power and propulsion. The evacuation warning does not arrive in time. It cannot arrive. If they wait for evacuation, the ship rolls over. The valves are opened. Seawater invades the engine rooms on the healthy side. Men working in the infernal heat of the boilers are suddenly drowned by the freezing torrent of the Pacific. They die without seeing the enemy, betrayed by the need to keep the deck guns level for a few more minutes. Their screams are muffled by the roar of the water and the clangor of machinery. The sacrifice works. The Yamato rights itself. Trembling, heavy, but horizontal. It continues to fire. But speed drops. From 25 knots to 18, then to 10, it ceases to be a predator and becomes a besieged island. The third wave arrives at 1340. The sky darkens again. This time the damage is catastrophic. Bombs destroy the central superstructure. The deck is a slaughterhouse. Severed limbs, steel shrapnel, and spent casings form a macabre carpet. The smell of burning flesh mixes with the acrid odor of gunpowder. A torpedo hits the rudder. The giant is paralyzed. It is trapped in a gentle and eternal turn to port, spinning in circles like a blind bull in the arena, bleeding to death while the pecadors continue to drive in their lances. Internal communication is cut. Electricity fails in entire sectors. Darkness takes over the labyrinthine corridors below deck, illuminated only by sporadic fires and emergency lanterns. The water reases. It is no longer a controlled flood. It is the sea reclaiming what is its own. Admiral It, on the high bridge, holds the railing. He gives no more orders. There are no orders to give. He merely watches the systematic dismemberment of a nation's pride. He sees the escort destroyers being hunted down one by one. He sees the end of an era. The era of the battleship, the king of the seas, is over. It was not killed by another king, but by a swarm of aluminum wasps. The ship tilts again. This time counterflooding does not work. There are no more dry compartments to sacrifice. The list reaches 15 degrees, 20 degrees. The gigantic guns jam on their axes, unable to rotate against gravity. Loose ammunition on the decks begins to roll, crushing the wounded. The Yamato is tired. The steel groans, a high-pitched sound of structural torsion that sounds like the lament of a dying whale. The end is not a possibility. It is a certainty approaching with the gravity of a falling mountain. By 14 o'clock, the Yamato is no longer fighting the enemy. It is fighting physics. The list reaches 35 degrees. The deck, once a vast flat battlefield, becomes a cliff of wood and oily steel. A sailors slip, clinging desperately to railings, vents, and each other, sliding inexorably into the churning sea foaming against the port gun. The order to abandon ship is finally given, but it is not a tactical command. It is a whisper of mercy amidst the chaos. For the men trapped in the lower decks, the machinists, the ammunition handlers, the medics in flooded aid stations, the order never arrives. Or, if it does, it is a cruel sentence. How to climb vertical ladders in a world that has rotated 90 degrees. How to open hatches that now weigh tons against water pressure. They are sealed in iron tombs. On the bridge, time seems to freeze. Captain Kasakwaruga, a man who lived by the sea, decides he will die by it. He asks to be tied to the compass bin. He wants to be standing, looking north, toward the home he will never see again when the water comes. Admiral Lit shakes the hands of his remaining officers, turns his back, and locks himself in his private cabin. There are no grand final words, only the muffled sound of a door closing on a life and an era. At 14:23, the giant gives up. The final roll is slow and majestic, terrifying in its inevitability. The Yamato rotates completely on its longitudinal axis. For the first time, the monster's belly is exposed to the light of day. The dark red hull, encrusted with marine life and covered in slime, rises from the waves like the back of a titanic whale. The 4 bronze propellers, each the size of a house, spin slowly in the empty air, dripping salt water, useless and silent. It is a sight that defies comprehension. The greatest mobile fortress on Earth is upside down. And then, it happens. As the ship turns, the contents of the ammunition magazines lose stability. Hundreds of 460mm shells, each weighing nearly 1.5 tons, slide from their racks. They collide. Friction and impacts light the fuses. The explosion is not conventional. It tears reality. The Yamato does not merely sink. It is obliterated from the inside out. The detonation of the main magazines creates a column of fire that rises 6,000 meters into the sky, a mushroom cloud of destruction visible 200 kilometers away on the coast of Kagoshima. American pilots flying at 1,000 meters report that their planes were shaken by the shockwave like leaves in a gale. The water around the ship vaporizes instantly. Sailors who had managed to jump into the water and were swimming away are crushed by the pressure of the underwater shockwave. Their internal organs rupture. They die without knowing what hit them, silenced by the very force they swore to defend. Pieces of the superstructure, gun turrets, and armor shards rain down on the ocean for minutes, like hail of incandescent metal. Black, oily smoke covers the sun, turning day into twilight. When the smoke begins to dissipate, carried by the cold wind of the Pacific, the Yamato is gone. There is no wreckage floating where it was, only a vast circle of dirty foam and black oil spreading like blood in the water. The vortex created by the sinking sucks everything to the bottom. Wood, rubber, bodies. Of the 3,332 men on board, only 276 survive. They are covered in heavy oil, blind coughing black water from their lungs, clinging to pieces of charred wood. There is no joy in survival. There is only a stunned silence, broken by the distant cries of the wounded and the sound of American plane engines circling the site like sated vultures, taking photographs of the liquid grave. The end of the Yamato is not just the sinking of a ship. It is the full stop of a military philosophy. The belief that steel, size, and brute force could win modern war sank that April afternoon. The battleship, king of the oceans for centuries, was dethroned by swarms of mechanical flies. The samurai sword was broken by an industrial assembly line. The survivors are rescued hours later by the remaining destroyers. They are pulled onto the deck, shivering not from cold, but from shock. They look back to the place where the mountain of steel existed and see only the empty horizon. The Empire of the Rising Sun has lost its sun. In the depths, at 340 meters, the Yamato rests broken in two main pieces. It lies in eternal darkness, a cathedral of violence silenced by pressure. Its guns, which never saw the decisive naval battle for which they were created, now point at the mud of the seabed, guardians of bones and ghosts. The war would continue for a few more bloody months. Okinawa would fall, the atomic bombs would fall, but the soul of the Imperial Navy died there, under the mushroom cloud of the Yamato. The sea returned to being just the sea, indifferent, vast, and cruelly beautiful, washing away the oil stains and erasing the scars from the surface, but keeping the memory of the Titan in its cold guts. What remains are only echoes and shadows. If you carry the weight of what you have heard, leave your like as your final seal on this memorial and subscribe to the channel so that the next chronicle finds fertile ground in your memory. The roar has ceased. The ocean is a grave without headstones. History has been witnessed.